How's everybody doing? It's Coach Harris. I want to thank Mr. Smith for his help with the English and reading videos. Today I'm going to be digging in a little bit to science. Hopefully you found the 2 math videos that we made here at Stewart's Creek helpful, whether you're at any of the schools in Rutherford County or a Stewart's Creek student. Again, thank you to Braxton Carrico for all his help, and Mr. Bissinger, in producing these videos. We're going to talk about science today. Let's begin by talking about the structure of the test itself. What you have is either 6 or 7 passages. It's different with each test, okay? Sometimes I'll have 7 passages, sometimes I'll have 6. The thing we want to focus on is being prepared for 7 passages, okay? So you have a 35-minute time limit, 7 passages. So at the most, you want to give yourself 5 minutes per passage, okay? So real simple math right there, 35 minutes, 7 passages, so 5 minutes per passage. And so we're going to prep for that idea, okay? So again, 5 minutes per passage. Well, let's think about this real quick. The science is not too dissimilar from the reading and how we want to approach it. Now, the way the information is presented is vastly different. Look at this. This is an example of one of the older ACT exams and how they present the information. So what we have here is we have a table here, a table here, a table here. We got a paragraph there, a little paragraph there, another one right there, maybe a little discussion about what's going on here. I cannot emphasize enough this very first point when it comes to how we approach the science. Number 1, do not read the passage. Okay, again, do not read the passage unless the question says according to the passage. Now, when it says according to the passage, we don't just then go automatically up and start reading, trying to understand every little thing in the passage. Here's the deal. Most of our students really give a great effort to comprehend or understand what they read. You're trained that same way. So when you get into a passage, your mind goes to a place where, and maybe not on this one tends to be physical science or physics, but maybe with something with biology. You see a genus and species name, your mind starts to say, where do I remember that from? We don't need that in getting ready for the science portion of the ACT. Okay, we want to focus on the material right here and the information that's presented. In the same way you looked at the reading and you didn't have to read the whole thing, but you picked the important parts, okay? The thesis, the transition of the last sentence, those key sentences, and then of course capital letters, numbers, all that stuff that we heard about on the previous video by Mr. Smith. Here, we want to eliminate the reading because that distracts us, to be very honest. Now, when I took the test a year and a half ago, I got into the science test, and out of the 6 passages they had on that one, I had to look in the in the 6 passages, I had to actually look in the paragraphs only 3 times out of 40 questions. Okay? So how many times have you done something like this? You go right to the reading. We don't want to do that. Again, do not read unless the question says according to the passage. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So what do we do? Well, we're going to go to the data, the graphs, the charts, the diagrams, tables, that information. Now, you don't have to understand everything, but what you do want to do is make yourself familiar with the information. This is a great example for one. So what I have is I have a table here. I've skipped this information. I'm only going to come back to it if I have to. I see the structure of table 1 as table 1, 3 trials, time, speed, okay, and then it gives me averages. If you get a table with averages, it makes life so much easier. So I see an average speed right there of 3.28 feet per second. Now, do I have any idea what they're measuring? Not yet. I don't know. I haven't read any of this. I don't need to at this point. So, again, I'm just kind of looking at this. I see an average. I see some comparisons here, 3.28, 3. I'm just making myself familiar. Go to table 2. Now I want to look at the structure of table 2. I ask myself, is it the same as table 1? In this case, the answer is yes. So my comparison becomes the average. So I look at table 1, table 2, and I see that table 1 is faster than table 2. Okay, and so I'm just going to mentally put those in order. Then I take a peek at table 3. Is it set up the same way? In this case, the answer is yes. So I look at the average right here. I see that it is faster than table 1. So what I just did is I put them in order according to which one's fastest to which one is slowest. Now, think back to what we did with the reading nonfiction. Remember, one of the keys is where is the answer? It's not necessarily what is the answer, but where do I go to look for the answer? So if my lovely assistant over there, Ty, would help me out and go ahead and scroll down to the first question. All right, so the first question says this, the fastest times. Now remember what I wrote down. I had 3, 1, 2. All right, so I'm going to get a better marker for my next video. All right, so it says the fastest times resulted from which fastest times. That was in number 3, table 3. So now I get to look at table 3. And then it says which wheels. I had no idea about anything about wheels. Nothing in the table said anything about wheels. But guess what? Now I can peek just above it and I look for the word wheels. It says hard rubber wheels, studs embedded into them. I knew where to look and the answer is B. Now, did that take a vast amount of scientific knowledge to be able to do that? No. Okay. Now, was I overwhelmed by reading a passage that I really didn't understand everything in? No. All right. What did I do? I made myself familiar with the data. I found highs and lows. Okay, that's a big key for science. They're going to always ask you questions about what is the hottest, what is the wettest, what is the driest area. I mean, they're going to ask highs, lows, those things that stick out of the norm. Okay, for instance, first question was fastest. Ty, go ahead and scroll down, look at question number 5. Question number 5, during which of the following was the travel time the slowest? Okay, so how would we do that one? Well, we know it goes back to table 2. Do I have to read anything in the paragraph there? Nope, not at all. I can go right into it. While we've got this pulled up, here's number 2. It says, according to study 1, go straight to the table, make your comparisons. Look at number 4. Number 4 says, based on the passage. Now, this is an example of one of maybe the 4 or 5 in a test where you have to look at the passage. But don't go just back to the passage and start reading. What you want to do is you want to find keywords in the question and then use those keywords to skim in the passage for those words. For instance, right here I would say, it says based on the passage, the higher average speeds were probably the result. So I'm looking for the words higher average speeds or average speeds, and then I'm going to peek at the answers. Because sometimes the answers themselves might give you the right area to look for in the passage. So I'm going to just kind of glance through those: friction, temperature, sunlight, and statistical error. And if I make myself familiar with that, I go back to the passage, then I can find 1 or 2 of those, and instead of looking at an entire paragraph, it brings it down to a much, much smaller area. Okay? So, some things you need to know about the science. Number 1, okay, we're going to plan on 5 minutes per passage. Now, let's break it down a little bit more. I want to do this first part where I'm looking at the data, the charts, the graphs, the diagrams. I want to give myself about 1 minute and 30 seconds to make myself familiar with that data. Okay? Now, you don't have to understand it all. You just kind of have to be very familiar with it. No highs, lows, extrema, stuff like that. So 1 minute and 30 for the skim. Remember, we're relating it back to the reading. All right, and then that leaves 3:30 left over for Q&A. Now, remember, there's not 10 questions on a science passage. Okay? There's going to be 5 or 6 or 7 questions total. Now, together that gives me 5 minutes, and that fits within that time frame we're talking about. Now, a little bit more about the science. There's going to be a science passage on most ACT exams that looks like the one that's coming up right here. Mr. Helper, would you take it down to passage 2, please? Okay, now I've talked about data, charts, graphs, diagrams, tables, all that good stuff. And then they're going to throw one at you, maybe, not every time, but most of the time, about probably 80 to 90% of the ACT exams have one that's all written. What are we going to do with this? Well, first of all, I would suggest that you take the all written passage, that portion, set it off to the side. Don't do that until the very end of the entire ACT. Here's why. You probably didn't wake up this morning and think to myself, hey, I get to read charts, graphs, diagrams, and data today. Okay, that's not necessarily what you always do as a teenager, okay? So you may not be as adept at that, but as you get good at it, okay, especially for this ACT science portion, you want to kind of keep that momentum going, all right? If you did a good job on passage 1 right here, and you really feel like, all right, I'm in that mode right here where I'm evaluating data right, I'm getting my answers, I'm finding them, I'm feeling pretty good about that. Hey, I'm going to have to get you right back in a second. I'm videoing for an ACT video.
Okay.
So anyway, hey, the pause that happens. So anyway, so if you're on that roll where you're doing data, graphs, charts, diagrams, stuff like that, then go ahead and do another one like that. Because usually there's only one that's all written. So we want to set that off to the side, come back to it, and do that at the very end after you've built that momentum on graphs and charts and diagrams and tables and all that good stuff. Okay? Now, we come back to it. How are we going to do this? Well, let's think about this. This kind of takes advantage of what's called the scientific method, or scientific process is maybe what it's called now. So the actual top little paragraph, this is the scientific question. So you want to read that. Okay, now it's only 2 or 3 sentences, but make sure you read that. Okay, that lets us know, hey,
it's Ryan. You got a second?
Mr. Denton, I'm doing a video right now for ACT.
Oh, poop, I just interrupted.
It's okay. We'll keep going. I don't lose my momentum. So
It's a kid that wanted to know how he's going to take the test.
send him to 607, Mr. Denton.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
All right, so you want to read that, okay, for sure. Read that top one. Then you want to apply your reading strategies. You want to read enough of this, usually 2 to 3 sentences, okay, enough of this to know what that scientist says as his or her answer, okay? Then you go to the next one. Again, read 2 to 3 sentences at the top there to know what his or her answer is as well. Again, you're just making yourself familiar. Then when you go to the questions, you say, oh, okay, that was with scientist 1, or that was with scientist 2. And instead of being overwhelmed by all this stuff that you have to read, you're owning the process and you're putting yourself in a place or a position where you can find the answer. Okay, remember, it's about finding the answer and not knowing the answer. So anyway, real quick overview on the science. On the parts that have graphs, charts, diagrams, tables, do not read the paragraphs unless a question says according to the passage. Then we go back to the paragraph, skimming, looking for key words. The all written portion, do it last. Okay, approach it the same way you would the nonfiction reading. Make sure you read the top, because that's a scientific question. A few sentences here, a few sentences here, just enough to know what that person says is their answer to the question. Timing, minute 30 seconds for the skimming or making yourself familiar with the data, and then 3:30 for the Q&A. Okay, good luck to you guys. Give us a follow at CoachPT91 or subscribe to our YouTube channel, Stewart's Creek High School.